Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tale, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, and shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late now. Let's get into today's tale. Covered all my family's expenses, but my parents always favored my sister the day. I paid off their mortgage. They said, "Finally something useful from you." When I said I was moving out, my dad slapped me and said, "You owe her a future too." 3 months later, they tried breaking into my new apartment with a crowbar. The last few months have been a whirlwind, everything that had been simmering for years. Between me and my family, my parents especially, finally boiled over. There wasn't one single incident that caused it, but rather a long, exhausting buildup of entitlement, guilt-tripping, and emotional manipulation that culminated in something I still have a hard time believing actually happened. It all started escalating after I paid off my parents' mortgage. It was something I did quietly, out of what I thought was love or responsibility. I've been helping them financially since my early 20s. I'm 36 now, and that support grew from the occasional grocery run or utility bill to covering major repairs, medical expenses, Isla's tuition, and eventually the entirety of the house loan. They didn't ask me directly to pay off the mortgage. They hinted. They were guilty. They left envelopes lying around, let me overhear phone calls they never meant to have in private. And I, who had always been the one to step up, finally gave in. I wired the final payment and told them it was done. No debt, the house was finally theirs. I didn't expect a parade, but I guess I did expect something. My father barely looked up from his tablet. "Finally, something useful. From you," he said. My mother said nothing, just stood at the kitchen sink peeling carrots like I'd told her. I picked up bread, not cleared their future, and Isla. She was scrolling through her phone on the couch, barely reacting. "Cool," she said. "So can you help me with a condo down payment?" Now that was the moment it clicked. I was never seen as a daughter. I had a financial plan, a fallback option, a resource when I said I was moving out. It triggered something primal in my father. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over. I remember the noise, more than anything, the clatter of wood, the sharp slap that followed. He hit me not hard, but hard enough you don't get to walk away, he said through clenched teeth. "You weigh her a future too, that her." Of course was Isla. I left the next morning. I didn't pack everything, just what I needed. Clothes, laptop documents, a couple of old journals. I found a 1-bedroom in Fremont, small but full of light, and signed the lease within a week. It was the first time in my life that I felt like something was mine for the first time in a long time. I was silent stillness. No one was shouting in the next room. No passive-aggressive comments about money, about how I was cold or selfish for not doing more. I could sleep through the night. I could sit on my own couch, light a candle, and read without feeling like I had to earn it. But the call started almost immediately. First, they asked about the heating bill. Apparently the thermostat malfunctioned and they ran the heat for 4 days straight. Then it was Isla's car insurance. She missed a payment and could lose coverage. My dad left a voicemail that was nothing short of a guilt trip marathon. "After everything we've done for you, Priya, is this how you thank us?" I didn't reply. I started therapy. My therapist told me something that stuck. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop showing up for people who only call you when they need something. I wanted to believe that I wanted to believe I wasn't the bad guy here. But every time my phone buzzed, I felt that old tightness in my chest, the one I'd carried since childhood, the need to be the fixer, the provider, the one who made it all okay. Then one night, everything spiraled out of control. It was close to 3 a.m. I was already awake, some insomnia, a leftover habit from years of hypervigilance. I was sitting on the floor of my living room in an oversized hoodie sipping cold tea when I heard the sound, a hard clank metal against glass. Then again, then voices. I froze my apartments on the second floor, but I heard someone trying to get in through the sliding balcony door. I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking. I called 911. The dispatcher asked if I could identify the intruders. I said, no. How could I? But something in me knew. When the cops arrived and took them into custody, I stood outside in slippers and a bathrobe, barely able to process what I was seeing. It was my parents, my father with a crowbar, my mother in her nightgown, hair disheveled, eyes wild, and Isla standing a few feet behind them with her arm crossed like she was waiting for a show. They said they had no choice. They said I was hiding. They said I'd abandoned my family and my father. Ever. The master manipulator looked at me from the back seat of the police car and said, we had to come. You left us no option. I haven't even gotten to what happened after that. There's too much more. But for now, I'm still trying to figure out what to do with that moment. The sound of the crowbar against my window. The silence between the words. The way Isla didn't flinch. I didn't press charges. Maybe I should have. Maybe if it had been strangers, I wouldn't have hesitated for even a second, but it wasn't strangers. It was my parents. It was my sister. It was the people who raised me people. God helped me, loved even if I didn't like them anymore. The officer looked at me with something like pity. When I told him I didn't want to take it further, he gave me a card anyway. Told, Mito, keep it on hand. You never know, he said, writing his direct extension on the back the next morning. I sat on my couch and stared at the balcony door for hours. The lock was bent. The glass had held, but barely. There were small cracks running through it like veins. It reminded me of my mother's voice when she used to sing while doing Theedish's suite. Clear and now distant, and cracked too. That afternoon, I went to the leasing office and asked them to switch my unit. I didn't even wait for a response before offering to pay the fee. I moved 3 floors up, different layout, different view, same building. But that door wasn't haunted. I didn't answer the phone for a week. They kept calling different numbers, voicemails, emails. Once a letter arrived, handwritten in my mother's neat cursive. We only did what we did because you left us no choice. This is what family does. They take care of each other. You're not being yourself. That last sentence stuck out to him. Not being yourself. They meant the version of me that gave and gave until I had nothing left. That's who they missed. I started writing things down. Not just for therapy, but for me. Things I remembered from childhood that never made sense until now. Like how, when Isla broke a vase and blamed me, I was punished, without question, or how my birthday was always combined with her stow. Save money, even though we were 4 years apart and she got her own cake anyway. How I was never allowed to take jobs too far from home even after college. How they made me feel. Guilty for wanting a life that didn't include a house key to theirs. Looking back, I can't believe how much I let slide, or how hard I worked to convince myself that their behavior was normal. A few days after the break-in, I got an email from Isla. Mom and Dad are wrecked. You've destroyed this family. I hope your new life is worth it. No subject line. No greeting. No punctuation beyond the period at the end. I didn't reply instead. I forwarded it to my therapist, who just said, that's not your fault. The silence stretched longer this time. Weeks. No calls, no emails, no attempts to contact me. And for a moment, I actually thought maybe this was the quiet before a real truce. But it was quiet before. Another storm about a month after the break-in. Received a letter from my bank. It was flagged as suspicious. Activity. Someone tried to access my old joint account, the one I'd stupidly left open years ago when I was managing household finances for my parents. I hadn't touched it in ages. It barely had anything in it. But they tried to get in. Tried to claim I'd authorized them. Even submitted an old power of attorney form. I didn't remember signing. Turns out I hadn't. That's when I call out a lawyer. It felt like burning a bridge. But the truth was they'd already lit the match. I was just making sure it didn't spread to the rest of my life. The lawyer helped me send a formal notice of financial and personal separation. He called it a protective letter of non-responsibility, basically. It declared that I was not legally or financially tied to them in any way. It also included a candist on attempts to access my accounts or impersonate me. They received the notice, I know they did, because Isla texted me. Wow, so we're strangers now. No response from me, just another screenshot for the folder. There's something strange about grieving people who are still alive. They walk around the world. Maybe they're laughing at a restaurant or folding laundry and you're just missing them. Mourning a version of them that existed only in your head. That's what I've been dealing with lately. Mourning parents who never really saw me for who I was. Mourning the idea of a sister who had my back mourning the home I thought I came from. I didn't lose them in one night. I lost them over a lifetime. But it took that night, that crowbar, to make it undeniable. After the cease-and-desist letter went out, the silence returned, but this time it felt different. Heavier, not just a pause between attacks, but the beginning of something more deliberate. I wasn't naive enough to think they'd accepted it. My parents weren't the kind to walk away quietly from control. But for the first time, they had no legal tether, no keys, no access to anything in my life. And maybe that scared them, or maybe it just challenged their pride. I started noticing strange things. A couple weeks after everything went quiet, my building manager told me someone had been asking about me at the front office. Someone pretending to be a cousin. I don't have cousins in the US. My closest extended family lives in Mumbai. And none of them would know where I lived, unless I told them myself. The manager was smart. He didn't share any info, just filed it away, and told me as a heads up the next day. My car had a long key, like scratch across the passenger door. Nothing stolen, nothing broken into, just a message. A passive one, but a message. All the same. I didn't call the police this time. I didn't even take a photo. I just drove to the body shop and paid to have it buffed out because I wasn't about to let them pull me back into chaos. This was my peace, and I was going to protect it. Around this time, I started doing something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I started journaling again every morning, just 10 minutes, while my coffee brewed. Some of it was basic, what I was doing that day, what I'd eaten, how I slept, but some of it was darker. I wrote out memories I'd buried, things I'd tried to convince myself weren't a big deal, like the time I'd gotten a job offer in New York and my father said, only move that far away from their families. Oh, or the time I'd been in the ER with a stress-induced panic attack, and my mother's only concern was whether I'd remembered to pay the water bill. Writing it down made it real, and real things can be named faced, let go. I started telling people truth. When they asked about my family at work, I don't really speak to them anymore at the hair salon. No, I won't be going home for the holidays at my therapist's office. I'm trying to rewire the part of me that believes I have to earn love by sacrificing myself. And somewhere in the middle of that rewiring, I started rebuilding. I adopted a rescue cat, Luna. She was 6 when I got her, with one missing ear and a mean little hiss that made me laugh the first time I heard it. She reminded me of myself. Defensive, cautious, and sure. But with time, she warmed up, so did I. I redecorated my apartment. Nothing big, just small things that felt like me. Warm lamps, soft blankets, plants that didn't need too much light. I stopped trying to make things perfect and started making them comfortable. I even framed a photo of myself from a solo trip I took to Vancouver the year before. I'm standing on a hill, wind in my hair. No makeup, eyes half closed. Laughing like I forgot the camera was there. I look free and I hung it in my hallway, where I can see it every time I leave for work. Not as a symbol of where I've been, but where I'm going still. Every now and then I get a twinge of guilt, that old familiar pang, the part of me that still hears my father's voice in my head. You owe her a future too. As if I was born with a debt, and I'll be honest, I don't know if that voice ever fully goes away. I don't know if healing means silence or just learning how to speak louder than the echo. But I'm learning one afternoon, about 2 months after the break-in, I ran into an old family friend at the local farmer's market. Mrs. Kapoor, sweet woman, always had a kind smile used to bring lettuce over during Diwali. She looked surprised to see me. She hesitated, then said, "I heard you've been distant." That word distant, as if I had drifted like a cloud without cause, without story. I nodded. Yeah, I needed space, it was overdue. She tilted her head. "Your mom misses you." I smiled, polite but firm. I'm sure she misses the version of me that didn't have boundaries. Mrs. Kapoor didn't push. She just nodded gently. "I hope you're doing what's right for your heart." And I realized in that moment, I was maybe for the first time in my entire life. Still, there's a part of the story I haven't told yet. Because the silence didn't last forever. And when it broke, it wasn't with a bang, but with something even more dangerous. Subtle manipulation. A new approach. Isla, she reached out again. But not with anger this time, with vulnerability. A text. "I'm sorry, I didn't know how bad things were. Can we meet?" It stopped me cold. Not because I believed, but because part of me wanted to. I didn't reply right away. I stared at that message for 3 days. I reread every word, tried to hear the tone behind it, tried to decide whether it was real remorse or just a new tactic. Eventually, I texted back, "What would we even talk about?" She didn't answer. That silence said more than any apology ever could. A week passed after Isla's last message, no reply. No. Follow up? Just silence, that kind of silence used to haunt me. I used to fill it with worry, with assumptions, with responsibility. What if she's hurt? What if she really means it this time? What if I'm the one being cruel now? But now I sat with it. I let it settle into the corners of my apartment like dust. I didn't clean it up. I just acknowledged. It was there. I kept myself busy. Work was steady routine. Even I'd made friends with a woman in HR named Harper who invited me to trivia nights at a quiet bar near the waterfront. I started volunteering on Sundays at a local food co-op. Nothing life-changing, but little anchors. To remind myself I existed outside of my family's demands. Then one Friday afternoon, my lawyer called. They've responded. At first, I didn't understand what he meant responding to what the formal separation notice. He said, "Your parents sent a letter back through their attorney. They're contesting the language about emotional distress, and they're asking for compensation." I actually laughed out loud right there in the middle of my office. It was so absurd I couldn't even get angry. "What compensation?" I asked, almost amused. They're claiming that you benefited from living in their home into adulthood and that paying off the mortgage wasn't a gift, but a deferred living expense. He said calmly, "They're demanding the equivalent of 5 years of rent plus back interest." It wasn't just outrageous. It was calculated a legal jab designed to scare me into backing down, into making contact, into what else paying up. I asked my lawyer if they had any real cases. He said no. Washington state law was clear. Adult children had no legal obligation to their parents unless a contract existed, which there wasn't. The mortgage payoff had been voluntary. I had documentation, email, confirmation, even thank you card. My mother had sent me 2 days later, back when she still thought I'd be sticking around. He told me not to worry. I did anyway, because it wasn't about money. It was about power. They were still trying to control me from a distance. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in bed with Luna curled at my feet, and I thought about all the ways they had shaped my life, not just in big moments, but in the 1,000 tiny ways they taught me who I was allowed to be. I'd become someone who apologized for having needs, someone who shrunk to make room for others, someone who thought independence was selfish. And even though I'd escaped the physical space of their home, I hadn't completely left, not yet, not emotionally. They were still renting space in my head, still dragging chains behind them and trying to reattach them to my ankles. The next morning I went for a long walk along the canal. The spring air was cool but bright, and the tulips were just starting to bloom along the sidewalks. I watched couples walking hand in hand, a teenager skateboarding while humming loudly to music. Only he could hear an older woman feeding ducks with cracked corn out of a recycled yogurt container normally. Peace life. It hit me. Then so much of what they took from me wasn't money. It wasn't just time or opportunities. It was an ordinary life. Moments like these, the ability to sit in a park and not feel the weight of generational expectation on your chest. I called my lawyer and told him to proceed with a full rejection of their demands, and to include a statement that there would be no further communication unless pursued. Through official channels, he said, "Good, this needed to be said firmly." I hung up and didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. I just felt clear. And then the letter started, not legal ones, personal ones handwritten again from my mother from Isla. Even one eventually from my father, though his was typed, printed, and then signed. Like he couldn't quite commit to the vulnerability. They ranged from pleading, to manipulative, from faux apologies, to guilt-soaked accusations. "I didn't know you were this unhappy. You're still our daughter. Family is complicated. That doesn't mean you. When your sister isn't as strong as you, you know that we raised you. That has to mean something." One even said, "You used to be so good." That one hit me hardest, not because it hurt, but because it made things crystal clear in their eyes. Good meant compliant, quiet, generous. To the point of self-fear. I wasn't that version of me anymore, and they didn't know what to do with that. I stopped. Reading the letters after that, I still saved them, just in case. I placed them in a large envelope labeled for therapy, and tucked them away in a drawer. I never opened unless I needed to remind myself how far I'd come. Sometimes I'd wonder what would have happened if I'd just kept my head down. If I'd stayed, if I'd kept paying, kept sacrificing, kept playing the role they'd written for me. Before I ever had a say, I probably would have cost like that until they were gone. But I would have disappeared, long before they did. Now I was starting to exist, not perform. Please do not modify. It exists. There's more still to come. I feel it. This story isn't over yet, but for the first time, I don't feel like the villain in it. I feel like the narrator. About 3 weeks after the last letter, the silence held. There was no second legal attempt. No second legal attempt. No new voicemails. No random knocks at my door. My lawyer said it was likely they'd gotten the message, or maybe they were regrouping, waiting for a new angle. Either way, it was quiet. But that didn't mean I wasn't thinking about them every few days. Something would remind me, a whiff of my mother's favorite incense in a passing store, a Honda that looked like Isla's parked outside a bakery, an old photo that fell out of a book I hadn't opened in years, showing all 4 of us standing stiffly on a boardwalk in Cannon Beach, me maybe 12 in a hoodie. Far too big for me because hand-me-downs were cheaper in that photo. I was already leaning away. I took the photo to therapy. My therapist, Rowan, studied it for a long moment, then said, "You were already trying to protect yourself back then." I nodded. I didn't know it at the time, but she was right. I'd spent most of my life bracing for impact. The passive-aggressive remarks, the expectations dropped like anvils. The way everything Isla wanted became my problem too, from chores to college, to failed relationships. I used to believe I was lucky to be the strong one, the independent one. I wore it like armor, but strength, when it's only used to keep everyone else standing, becomes a kind of prison one. Thursday night. Harper from HR invited me over for dinner. Nothing formal, just wine, lasagna, and whatever. Her roommate had impulsively picked up at Trader Joe's that week after dinner, while her roommate watered succulents. Harper asked casually, You ever think about reaching out again? Just to get closure, I paused. Not because I hadn't thought about it, I had. But every time it felt like walking back into a fire that hadn't gone out, only gone quiet. I don't think they're capable of giving me closure, I said. Harper nodded. Sometimes, you have to give it to yourself. That stuck with me, closure. Not as a moment you receive, but something you build. So I started building it. I drafted an unsent letter. Several, actually, one to my mother, one to my father, one to Isla. I didn't write them to send, I wrote them to release me, to stop carrying the weight of words unspoken. Here's a piece of what I wrote to. Isla, I love you, but I can't keep living in the shadow of your needs. I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm. I tried 4 years and all I got was ashes. I cried writing that not because I missed her, but because I missed who I thought she could have been if we had been raised differently, if we had been treated like equals, if love in our family didn't come with strings some nights. I still wake up anxious, I'll hear a sound outside and tense up thinking it's them. My body remembers what my mind tries to forget, but it's getting better. The fear is fading, being replaced by something else. Something quieter, steadier confidence. Not the loud kind, not the performative kind, the kind that comes from knowing who you are and who you're not willing to be anymore. I changed the locks to my heart, not just my apartment. And then something happened that I didn't expect. I got a call from an unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but this time I picked up, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of instinct. It was an old friend of my mother's, Nina Auntie. She sounded hesitant, like she didn't quite know where to begin. After the usual pleasantries, she said, "Your parents. They've been saying things to everyone that you've gone rogue, that you've been influenced by people, that you're angry because they didn't give you enough freedom." I sighed. I'm not surprised she paused. I don't believe them. I just wanted you to know that. I remember what you were like as a kid. Always helping, always quiet, but watching you were never the problem. You just got tired. I didn't expect to cry, but I did just a little. She didn't ask for details. She didn't press. She just said, "I hope you're happy now." And I realized I was getting there, not perfectly. Not completely, but piece by piece. There's still a long way to go, but I'm no longer walking in circles around my family's needs. I'm walking forward, and I don't think they know what to do with a daughter who no longer waits to be picked about a month after the call from Nina Auntie. I got a letter from my father, but this one didn't come in an envelope. It was taped to the front door of my apartment. I'd just come back from a run, my headphones still. Hung from my ears the beat of whatever playlist I'd been zoning out to, slowly fading into background noise. At first I thought it might be a notice from the building maintenance, a missed package, something benign. But no, it was his handwriting, blocky, forceful, the kind that tried to look professional but always felt more like a lecture. "We're not the enemy families. Fight families hurt each other. That's how people grow. It's time to come home. We don't have to talk about the past if you don't want to." There was no greeting, no signature, just that I remember standing there sweaty, holding my water bottle, reading it 3 times before carefully peeling it off and placing it in my recycling bin. Not even a for therapy folder this time, it didn't deserve to live among the real hurt. Because this wasn't vulnerability. It was bait. And I wasn't biting. What struck me most wasn't the message itself, but what it revealed. That even now, after everything he still believed, control could be regained. If the tone was softened, that all it would take was a few lines and I'd fold again, that the years of manipulation and resentment could be brushed aside like dust on a countertop. But that dust was my whole childhood, and it doesn't sweep away that easily. I thought about calling my lawyer. Again, thought about installing cameras, but I didn't. Instead, I talked to my landlord, and we quietly agreed to a no-contact note on file. If anyone came asking about me again, they were to be turned away and logged the front desk. Staff were already trained to spot trouble. Apparently, I wasn't the only tenant who needed that boundary. It was a relief to know I wasn't alone in needing protection from the people who were supposed to love me around this time. Something else shifted. I'd been avoiding social media for months, not out of fear. They weren't the tech-savvy type, but because seeing other families smiling, celebrating birthdays or graduations, or casual Sunday brunches felt like paper cuts. I couldn't stop reopening, but one evening I logged in just for a moment just to see, and there they were, a photo of my parents sitting on their back porch Isla, standing behind them holding a cake. The caption on her profile read, "Family no matter." What yellow heart? The post had over 60 likes, a few comments. "Such a beautiful family, miss you all, so proud of you. Isla, you've been so strong, I didn't feel jealous. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Let them cure it. Whatever narrative they wanted. Let them play the part of the tight-knit family overcoming adversity. I no longer needed to fact-check them. That wasn't my job anymore. My job now was to live. And living looked like small things. Sunday mornings at the local bookshop. Quiet dinners with new friends, yoga classes, where I was the stiffest in the room but laughed anyway, leaving work on time, sleeping through the night, and yes, smiling without wondering who needed me next. Eventually, I told my story to someone I was dating. Slowly, carefully, not the whole thing, but enough. He didn't run. He asked questions gently. Not like he was mining for drama, but like he actually wanted to understand one night. As we sat on my balcony with a bottle of wine between us and Luna, circling our feet, he said, "It's kind of amazing that you got out." Yeah, most people don't. I hadn't thought of it like that before. That I got out, that I was the one who drew the line and didn't flinch when they tried to drag me back across it. And that maybe I wasn't broken, or selfish or cold. Maybe I was just someone who finally understood that love without respect isn't love, and guilt isn't loyalty. I never responded to the letter on my door, but it lingered in my thoughts longer than I wanted to admit, not because I felt pulled back into their orbit, but because it confirmed what I had suspected all along. They weren't capable of remorse, only strategy. And when one strategy failed, they'd just move on to the next. My therapist called it the slow erosion of identity. That's what had happened to me. Growing up, I had never been asked what I wanted, just told what I owed. And that's how they operated, with a currency of guilt and manipulation. But they didn't know how to deal with someone who refused to pay in anymore. And that right there became the idea for what I did next. It started with a spreadsheet. I sat down one Saturday morning with a fresh cup of coffee and listed everything I had paid for over the years. Mortgage payments, Isla's tuition, medical bills, home repairs, groceries, even gas. Money, every Venmo, every transfer, every bank draft that had disappeared into their accounts without so much as a thank you. Then I added it up, 231,670 hours. 92. Give or take a few receipts lost to time. I stared at the number for a long time. Not in shock. I already knew the scale, but seeing it there, quantified, made it concrete, like a monument to everything they had taken. I printed it, just one page neat, labeled with dates and categories. Then I wrote a letter, just 3 lines. "This is what I gave your family. Consider it paid in full. Don't contact me again. No. Rage, no. Accusations. Just facts." I mailed it through my lawyer, certified with a return receipt. I wanted them to have to sign for it, to hold it in their hands, to see the number and understand. Not because I wanted them to pay it back, but because I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd mistaken as entitlement. I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one. But 2 weeks later, I saw something interesting. Isla updated her LinkedIn. She was looking for a job, and for the first time she was no longer listing herself as creative director at family business. There was no family business. It was just a polite way of saying, supported by my sister, now she had to stand on her own. I also heard through a cousin, I still speak to occasionally that my parents had started downsizing, sold their second car, let goof. Their cleaning service canceled a cruise. They'd been planning, the cousin told me with wide eyes. They said money's been tighter lately. They didn't say why. I just smiled. Oh, that was my revenge. No scenes, no lawsuits, no vindictive smears on social media. Just silence and the absence of me. They had spent their entire lives building themselves up by breaking me down, by positioning Isla as the center of gravity. And now suddenly, I wasn't in orbit anymore. I was a planet of my own. And they couldn't breathe in my atmosphere. A few months later, I took a solo trip to Sedona. Nothing fancy, just me, a quiet Airbnb, and red rocks that glowed like fire at sunset one morning while hiking Bell Rock Trail. I stopped at a cliffside ledge, sweaty and out of breath, and just sat there. No phone, no plans, just airspace freedom. I thought about how far I'd come, not geographically, spiritually, emotionally. How I'd gone from being the designated problem solver of my family to being a woman who didn't answer the phone just because it rang, who didn't believe love should feel like debt, who didn't confuse obligation with connection. And for the first time, I felt something that surprised me. Not anger, not bitterness, not even pride, peace that was the ending they never expected. Not my destruction, not my surrender, just me thriving completely out of their reach. And if that's not revenge, I don't know what is.